What the hell do I do with these millennials? That has to be one of the most common questions I get in my classes. Trainers and supervisors across the country are struggling to relate and deal with the millennial police officer. Well, I've got bad news for you. The millennials have been here for a while, and they're not going anywhere. So we'd better learn how to not only understand them, but use them to their full potential. It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. Generational studies have been one of the go-to areas of social science for a while now, with terms like the lost generation, the greatest generation, baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials. We've been inundated with studies and research defining people based solely on when they were born. And that's right, when they were born. Might as well be studying astrology while you're at it. So our new hire is Gen Z, the year of the dragon, and a Capricorn. That means he's going to be a well-behaved, risk-averse, successful know-it-all who will make a great manager. Whatever. I know that this will likely upset some people. Many people feel strongly about the predictiveness of the generational models as well as astrology, but I have never put any faith into it. My experience has shown that each person is an individual, and the year, month, or even day that they were born has little predictive ability. Get to know the person first. That's how you properly train and supervise and lead. With my complaints about the significance placed on generational theory firmly established, now let's throw that out and talk about the new generations in law enforcement. I'll use the terms that are common so that we can all be on the same page. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Many supervisors and leaders in law enforcement have been in the profession for a bit. Some of your higher-ranking officers will find themselves in their 40s and are struggling to engage with the brand new 21-year-old officer. Having heard the terms bandied about, they think that any officer younger than them must be a millennial. But let's get our definitions right before we dig into behavior. There are very few baby boomers in law enforcement. Baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. The term baby boomers comes from the post-World War II baby boom, a noticeable increase in the birth rates after the soldiers came home from the war. Boomers would be 57 years old or older right now, which means that the few of them that are still in law enforcement are at the very end of their careers. They may be in upper management or even still walking the beat, but they're only a few short years from retirement. The baby boomers generation was defined by economic and educational growth. Boomers had access to higher levels of formalized education, better nutrition, and more economic prosperity, which ultimately led to greater worldview and a tendency to question authority. Next, we have Generation X. Gen X were born between 1965 and 1980, sometimes called the latchkey generation due to the prevalence of both parents working and the lack of adult supervision while growing up. Gen X officers are 41 years old or older and make up a high percentage of the more experienced officers. Many Gen X have almost 20 years of service on their departments and are first-line supervisors and division-level supervisors. Now, the lack of adult supervision played a big part in the development of Gen X. They grew up dissatisfied and cynical, which came through with their musical choices of punk and independent film. There was a trend towards a strong development of common sense among this generation, which worked very well in the law enforcement world. Now we're to the millennials. Now, this is where the big surprise comes in for many of the supervisors asking me how to deal with millennials. A lot of those supervisors are millennials. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. That means that your youngest millennial is 25 years old and the oldest millennial is 40. That's right, 40. The average age of police officers in the United States today is 30 years old, which means the average police officer is a millennial. Now we've got our Gen Zs after the millennials. They were born between 1997 and 2012, which means that all of your younger, brand new officers are Gen Z. Zoomers, as they're commonly called, grew up with the internet and social media. More time on the screen, less time on the streets. The thing that made Gen X so suited for law enforcement is lacking in Gen Z. Gen Z are the ones law enforcement supervisors are generally complaining about. What do they have to complain about other than, "Get off my lawn, you damn kids"? Well, the most common complaints I hear are, they don't take direction well, you have to draw them a map. They don't care about the department, you can't get them to work overtime. They can't talk to people, and they don't stay. As soon as you get them trained, they're out the door. Let's take a look at each one of these issues and try to make some sense out of them. First, they don't take direction well. You have to draw them a map. Now, this isn't quite fair. Zoomers can and do take direction, but they like to learn at their own pace, and they don't do well in strict learning hierarchies. In other words, the more you tell them to do something, the less likely they are to do it. Zoomers prefer visual learning styles and learn well by seeing things done. This is likely due to growing up with a society based on heightened visual stimulus thanks to social media like YouTube. The fast pace and lack of resources prevalent in law enforcement forces supervisors to give quick verbal direction and expect their subordinates to pick up on what the needs are, and to not only do what needs to be done, but specifically know what was intended to be done. Zoomers don't do well with this, often questioning or even demanding more information and direction. So, stop telling them and start showing them. Supervisors need to take a few extra minutes and demonstrate the expectations to the new officer. Need them to do a business check? Go on the first one with them and show them how it should be done. Have a directed traffic patrol? Don't just tell them to monitor the intersection. Take them out and show them what to look for. Spending a few extra minutes at the beginning will save you hours and headaches later. They don't care about the department. You can't get them to work overtime. Now, this issue is tied closely to the world Gen Z grew up in. Zoomers grew up during the Great Recession and saw many friends and family members lose jobs and homes while struggling to make ends meet. They often feel that they are the hardest working generation in the workforce and recognize the importance of hard work, but they also realize that loyalty to the company doesn't mean you get loyalty back. They will work overtime, but only if it fits into their schedules and only if they're rewarded for it. And by reward, I mean more than just that extra cash on the paycheck. Departments have to realize that they no longer have a workforce that will eagerly accept all of the possible overtime availability. For far too long, agencies have survived on overtime. The idea that everyone wants to make a little extra money as a staffing plan just won't work with the new generation of workers. Departments have to start building camaraderie and a family atmosphere at their agencies. Encourage officers to bring their families into the department. Institute ride-along programs for the officers' friends and family. Have planned gatherings around the holidays so that the bosses can get to know the people that work for them both on and off duty. Recognizing that the balance between work and life is important to the younger generations can go a long way to encouraging officers to think of the department as family, and that will make them want to help out. They can't talk to people. Well, not face to face. Zoomers have been raised on the internet. They learned at a young age that most of their education, social, and entertainment needs can be instantly and immediately met with a digital device in their hands. This means they've spent much less time in the real world. Zoomers tend to grow up slower than past generations. They focus on school grades. They tend to be well-behaved, and they're often risk-averse. The less they interact with others outside of the internet, the worse their interpersonal skills tend to be. This can cause some issues when all of a sudden you start working as a police officer. Police are expected to be able to interact with a wide variety of people from all walks of life. An officer must be able to talk with the down-on-his-luck three-strike criminal 1 minute and the CEO of a major company the next. Understanding how to talk to people is a major requirement for being a good cop. Now, Zoomers can communicate. As a matter of fact, they have tremendous skills communicating through non-traditional means, such as Snapchat, Twitter, Discord, TikTok, and all of the other social media-based applications. The problem they tend to have is that face-to-face conversation. So teach them. When I started running into this problem as a field training officer, I quickly developed a training plan to fix it. Every time my recruit and I went into a convenience store, I required my rookie to learn 3 things about the clerk working in the store: the clerk's name, age, and their favorite food. The trick was the rookie couldn't ask the questions outright. They had to get the information naturally through conversation. When my recruits were faced with this challenge for the first time, they were as terrified as if I'd asked them to take on a knife-wielding psycho. But over a couple of weeks, they started to build their conversation skills, and with that, they started to build their confidence in being an officer. They don't stay. As soon as you get them trained, they leave. This is one of the real kickers. Many agencies struggle with hiring a new officer only to have them leave in a year, or in some cases, less than a year. I had one full-time job in my lifetime. For 27 and a half years, I worked for the same department, day in and day out. The average job tenure for a Zoomer is 2.8 years. That's right, 2.8 years. Job shopping is inherent in the younger generations. It's likely tied to the quick-moving markets and application platforms so common in the internet generation. As an organization, you have to work very hard to keep your employees, but retention was never high on departments' lists of things to accomplish. They always assumed that with a long, difficult hiring process, employees would stick around no matter what. That couldn't be further from the truth. To encourage Zoomers to stick around, they have to see value in their investment. One way to show them what the future could bring is through a mentorship program. According to PGI, 75% of millennials want to have a mentor in the workplace. Mentorship programs can help millennial officers feel more connected to the department, give them insight and aid for personal and professional development, and help them establish career paths at the agency. This type of investment in the future of our younger officers will likely encourage them to stay. Blue Canary is here to help you tell your stories, and I couldn't do that without the help of some very generous sponsors. Let's take a quick break to hear from one.
Help your team rise to increasing expectations with Agency 360's cloud-based software. Whether it is for the training of new employees or annual performance evaluations, Agency 360 can help trainers and supervisors streamline documentation, create consistency, and communicate clearly. Help retention by setting the tone and culture early with Agency 360. Learn more at agency360.com. That's AGENCY360.com.
Instead of complaining about Zoomers, we need to embrace them. Look for their strengths and encourage those while training them to overcome the deficiencies they may bring into the work environment. Not only can Zoomers make good cops, but they're going to have to. We're running out of people to do it. Zoomers are tied into the world through the internet at even greater levels than their parents, the millennials. Gen Z are the first digital natives living on the internet. They grasp computer programs and applications quickly and can get the most out of systems that are going unused at your agency. In the past, agencies have purchased major software packages such as computer-aided dispatch and records management systems that have tons of usability functions built in, but they're never used. Too difficult to train, or it'll just confuse them, is usually the excuse for not taking advantage of all that the technology has to offer. Zoomers are made for technology. They not only grasp it quickly, but find satisfaction in utilizing it to its fullest potential. Zoomers tend towards pragmatism. They solve problems. Zoomers aren't satisfied with theories. They tend to push for practical applications of ideas. That's exactly the type of proactive thinking needed in modern law enforcement. Agencies tend to do things because that's how they've always done them. That approach abhors change and stagnates not only initiative, but reform. The pragmatic Zoomer will go a long way towards modernizing law enforcement. And finally, Zoomers are fearless. They're not afraid. They're not afraid to fail. Failure is one of the major components to growth. When we fail, we learn what works and what doesn't work. We learn how to approach problems and apply solutions. Failures are lessons that guide you in the future and make you stronger. Without failure, then there will never be any change, never any advancement. Thomas Edison, considered one of America's greatest inventors, said, "I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Had Edison been afraid of failing, he would have never tried, and we might not have the light bulb or the telephone today. But fear of failure is deeply rooted within police departments all across the world. Their close political connections, tenuous leadership positions, and demanding work have left agencies in a predicament. Admit failure and get immediately attacked from all sides, or deny that any failure ever occurred. The choice is obvious. Many agencies refuse to admit error and stress that down through the ranks. Failure is fatal in the police world. Zoomers struggle with this. They understand the benefits of failure and are not afraid to try something different. They want new programs. They look forward to being involved in non-traditional policing. They embrace reforms. They push back against the agency's demands of perfection and will likely, in the long run, leave. Because they're not afraid to leave. I didn't stay at my agency for 27 and a half years because I was incredibly loyal. I stayed because I was afraid. I was afraid of trying to find another job, of starting over, of moving my family. I was afraid. So when I was unhappy at work, I swallowed it. When my boss said, "If you don't like it, the road runs north," I stayed. If you tell a Zoomer that the road runs north, then be prepared for them to take it. They are fearless, and the fearless generation is going to be law enforcement's salvation. And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.